Yeah.
Thanks, love. Hey, peeps. Oh, we're live, see?
We're live!
Can you do me a favor?
Greg's not in it.
We're just...
Greg's pretending to be live.
Yeah, we're just having the funnest
you take a
between...
picture from
We're
behind
on
there?
Regan's live stream.
got
Juan
live
Pa was
streams everywhere.
trying to get it up. Ours.
Yes.
Hi. Wait,
Hey.
camera
Hey.
moment.
Hey.
I want to make sure
And
these
now we're
are
having
in
a
it.
photo shoot.
Yes, hang on.
Hey.
Hang on.
Hey.
Camera moment.
Beautiful.
Camera
All of
moment.
them? You want all three?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It's so weird to pose.
Aw, thank
Especially
you.
live.
Regan and I were
Thank
saying this
you.
earlier, guys. Like, Regan and I were doing a picture, and when we were both like this, we're like, oh, this is so weird.
Oh wait,
Right.
hey, sorry guys, we didn't even know they were
Oh,
on.
yeah, of
Right.
course we did. And we're already getting hearts because you guys are like, look at all the sexiness and all the awesomeness,
cute.
right?
So cute.
Yes. So let's frame this up. I actually, this morning, Greg and I, when we hit the gym, we were talking about a conversation about one of my events that's coming up, have a collaboration with someone who's more of like the soft, sweet healer, and how some of their people were like, I can't be around Marci. She says fuck and she's too aggressive, right? And I, we had this conversation about, of course, whatever I'm triggering in somebody else is maybe what they're rejecting in themselves, like
Right.
they're badass masculine taking action. And I've had this experience for years of people being like, oh, you might see me on stage. I'm sure you have too, right? And I wanted to bring you in this conversation and see me being like super powerful, I'm a badass. And yet then they have this idea of like, oh, you just must be super masculine.
Right.
I'm like, I'm
You
wearing
must beat people at home.
right? And it's funny because I know I've had the same conversation with Kat, who's one of your best friends and one of my clients, where she's like, yeah, and then people coach with me and they're like, oh, you're so soft and
Right.
you're so, we're so like soft and feminine and all this. And I know the guy that I'm dating even says he gets guys all the time. They're like, isn't she like super masculine? He's like, no, she's actually super soft,
Yeah.
super sensitive, super in her feminine. So I wanted to, I literally was like, I get to pull her in this conversation. And I think these two beautiful men, you added some great things to that today as we talked about the feminine, masculine, and your own
Yeah.
journey in it, and how
Sure.
it actually is a journey for all of us. Wanted to bring up this conversation and dive into it so the masses could actually really, on like all of our cameras.
all
Peter
the live
Scott.
streams.
Yes, yes. So first off, give us some love for
Right.
like all the sexiness that we just brought together here.
Yes, look at that.
The camera sexiness and the amazing beings here that get to gather at the Magical Manifestation Mansion.
Right.
So I'm super stoked to just kind of dive into what your experience has been. You and I both said, you're like, yeah, you 5 years ago was probably like way more masculine. I was myself. And again, here, as I'm teaching, this comes out like this like
Right.
power, this
Right.
intense thing, which is the feminine fiercely feeling, right? Check it out, those
Oh,
hearts.
Yes.
Such good, right?
Amazing.
Yeah. And we both have been through this journey we were talking about, and which I'd love to start the conversation with, is you had said how us in that place, we were literally operating, probably getting 10% of our in the 10% receive, right? In
Divine
such a little
abundance,
place.
yeah.
The tiny amount of abundance we're getting to the moment, and you see clients deal with this,
Right.
where women have a hard time letting go of the masculine.
Right.
Because that's all they've ever known is like, I just do this
Uh-huh.
and I get results, and this is how I've got my results.
Push.
Yeah, and we're like, and the moment you actually surrender into your feminine and you receive and you allow that softness, you get 90% more upgrade in
Right.
your in the abundance factor.
Yeah, it's crazy. I actually went to an event in LA. I'm not going to say when, but because I don't even want to figure out whose event it was. But recently, and I sat in the room. It was an all-women's event, like a women's empowerment event for a day. And I sat in the room and I was like, oh my God, it's like a room full of men.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But they all looked beautiful.
Yeah.
They all looked feminine, right? They were all dressed up and in heels and da-da-da. And like, but the interactions and the energy, I remember I told you, I was like, oh my gosh. But then it's so interesting because I was like, wow, they're so in their masculine.
I know. I'm like, I just even his presence
just
is
stroke
so
it.
sweet and like, I'm just like,
And it's crazy because I looked at it and I was like, that was me like 5 years ago. But I was so stuck in it and I couldn't see it because really tuning into my masculine, like my creator, like boom kind of thing, like that
Yeah.
was the thing which had got me to where I was.
Yep.
But I wasn't seeing that. I thought that was like my highest level of like, oh, look what I've achieved and the success and all that. But there was like 90% more which I wasn't tapping into because I didn't understand how to surrender. I didn't understand the power of the feminine, like this is all the stuff we can talk about, right?
Yeah.
I didn't understand how to release because it was freaking scary to actually get in this place of choosing to let go.
Yep.
Right?
You probably got stuck once in a while by letting go to the wrong people, the wrong place.
Right.
It hurt. You had to learn a lesson, and so then you took over.
Well, it's
masculine
Totally.
stuff
it's
in.
a part of how we guard ourselves, just going through this phase. I know for you, as you express it, it's men and women that get stuck
Totally.
in this idea of I have to do and the force and the fight, which
Right.
is just the energy of that we're fighting instead of our actual ability to create in such a different way,
Right.
and how much it shifted for you in just going down to Columbia and opening up, learning to actually
Sure.
be. So maybe what's your experience with like on the men's side?
Well, yeah, we were having that conversation this morning because I spent a long time, I was pretty lost for a while. I felt my masculine power was lost. Like, I went through a divorce. I didn't really have a divine purpose. And so I spent a long time developing that strength and those to-dos and how to do that. But in the midst of that, I lost some of that softness. I lost some of that, call it the cuddliness, right?
Right.
And some of that was...
You like the cuddliness.
Okay, I'm back. And there's a lot of power in having that feminine, that sweetness, and
Right.
there's also a lot of strength in the veracity and components. And so for me, it was a challenge of learning how to tune back in, because my society and as a person, as a man, I'm the man, the creator, the always one pushing and doing. And what I found myself doing was conquering every mountain.
Yeah.
But every time there wasn't something to conquer, I would create something to conquer.
Right.
That means I destroy everything around me so I could fix something new.
Right.
And I got really tired of fixing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in the feminine, the learning to let go, the learning to receive, that there was like, oh, maybe I don't have to fight all the time.
Right, and this shows up for women because they're doing that too, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, it's exhausting. Like, this is when you see especially highly successful women that are, you know, doing well in the world and achieving and creating a lot, and they're like exhausted, like energetically. They're like, oh my God, and I have to push and do this again in order to create that, because they're not in their natural state of tapping into their feminine. They're like literally avoiding it at all costs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, let's clarify a little bit, because like, so the masculine is the to-do energy. Like the masculine energy is like, I want to achieve, I want to get to an end result. You know, so it's like single focus. I'm gonna like, I gotta get to the end, I gotta get to the end, I gotta get to the end. Where the feminine is like the dance, the play. I want to be seen for my light. I just want to play and flow. It's kind of like being water. So it's like you observe any resistance or obstacle. And where the masculine would be like, oh, I'm stuck, what do I do?
Right.
You right? The feminine goes, oh, let's flow around this
Flow
rock,
with
and
it,
let's
right?
ooh, what else could this be? And so it becomes this beautiful, effortless. I always say this resembles, you know, it's like the symbol of life. It's the figure eight. It's the inhale and the exhale. We're in the give and the receive. It's like the to-do and inspiration is the masculine in alignment, not the force or the fight. It's like, oh, this feels so good, I'm inspired. What do I do to serve? And then I receive from that service and the feedback, and I have it. And so most people are like in operating the masculine, they are actually, what we started with, getting a minimal of a return,
Right.
because they aren't open to the receiving, which also comes from just aligning to your level of worth.
Totally.
I'd love to know from you two, more being men in, you know, like obviously Greg started as one of my clients, came down to Columbia with me, and is now a big, massive part of my team. Total family for me and brother. And Juan Pa, you being beloved, how you guys classify each other, sexy ass bitches of love
Right.
in each other's life. What would you guys say are, you know, where you see maybe people have seen her as masculine? Because they might observe her on stage or absolutely kicking ass. Can I say what you just got as your result this last month?
Yes, you can.
She fucking did 1 million this month, right? Yes, amazing. And so, you know, us looking at this badass producer and how people might observe her as masculine. You know, a lot of people have observed me as masculine, and you've had interaction with me and know. You've seen the softness space and all that, and the coaching space, right?
Well, you just said this, right? Like, because we just met in person. He's like, oh, I've seen you online. Like, you're really, like, soft and sweet. Like,
I thought you were going to punch me in the face
crazy.
the first time I saw you.
That was what started the conversation this morning. Is
Yeah.
we brought up this thing about, you know, this event we're collaborating on, or, you know, this person that was like, oh, you know, Marci, so I was like, if my client said that, I would call them on their bullshit.
Right.
And that's the difference of being in the masculine and the feminine, is I'm like, I'm willing to stand and say, let's look at this. Why would this trigger you? And obviously, if you're triggered by someone being in power and standing strong, and, you know, or if you're going to lose your shit over a word, are you really in control? Or are you actually being, you know, out of control by letting circumstances outside you? And instead, we get to look at, why would that trigger you? And what is the gift of you actually leaning into that and observing that? So there's that's probably where the masculine stands up. It's like, yeah, and then we fiercely feel the feminine, and there's the softness is there. So it's like seeing all the gifts that are available when you actually look past what would have just stopped you.
Right.
So we started with that conversation, and then he said, yeah, it's like Regan. He's like, you know, I totally would have thought she's like massive badass. You know, she's got the shaved head, right? And he's like, and
Which, by the way,
yesterday-
is masculine and femme,
Yeah,
for the record.
it's my
right?
Jeep,
This
right?
has been thought about.
Did you notice that with
Yeah,
my Jeep?
yeah,
My
it's so
Jeep
cool.
is like a badass motherfucker, and I specifically was like, it gets to be the perfect example of the masculine femme, which you helped me
Right.
design it.
So cool.
So it's like the big ass tires and the you know, what are they called? My pulley thing on the front and the ramps.
The winch.
The thing, the winch.
The winch.
Yeah, like it's like a
They have
$60,000 ad, and then it's decorated in the galaxy and the stars and
Right,
the
it's
feminine
so
colors.
cool.
So you look at it and people are like, that's really fucking badass. And
Right.
the guy said it to me in there. He's like, I saw your Jeep. You are a badass bitch.
Mm,
And he's like, and yet you know it's a girl's Jeep.
Right,
Right?
right, you do.
Yeah, and so he thought that about you. He's like,
Yeah.
I just thought she was gonna be so hardcore, and then she's just so sweet. And I was like, welcome to our world where I get that all the time. People think, oh, she's
Yeah.
just so do when I'm teaching. So even in the masculine and feminine, always one or the other is gonna be coming out.
Right.
Because the goal is to become balanced in both and to receive both. Yet if I'm on stage, I might be in it where it's like the fire's coming through me and the masculine is actually operating at a higher level.
Right.
And then when I'm coaching, I'm actually soft and I'm feeling and I'm allowing. So one or the other is always going to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love from you guys seeing the difference of like where you're like, you see her softness. You know, I know same thing in the relationship I'm in. He's like, guys always think that I'm super, or people think I'm masculine. He's like, she is super soft and sensitive. And you, what would be your perception of that?
No, I see that. It's an important alchemy to do for yourself because you're so caught up, both men and women, into this role of rationalizing, of being guided by the structure of the mind of what we've learned, right? So it all comes from fear, I feel. It's from fear of
that is a
really,
beautiful
really, really
perception.
opening yourself and surrendering to what is. It's fear
Yeah.
to the magic, fear
Yeah,
to what
so
we don't
true.
know, fear to.
Wow.
So we create all these like structures
Look at all the
around
hearts
us.
you're creating.
You're
Juan
getting
Pablo.
love.
Lots of hearts and love. And they're like, just keep talking.
Right, more.
And that's when the personality is created. So you create
Yeah.
this way of just going around, kind of around the obstacles and not really seeing yourself, not really going within to see, oh my God, how vulnerable I feel when I am in my feminine.
Yeah.
How I'm nothing. I'm really nothing. I'm just like a feather being moved by the wind, really. You know, when you really trust. But it takes a lot of courage to
That's
do
such
that.
a beautiful
So
way
the
to
problem is
explain
like some people have that courage and like take it the other way. The masculine start doing instead of softening and surrendering. And that's I feel that's part of the process because you come into that and then sooner or later you're gonna hit, right? A wall, experiences, people, relationships. Life just backs you up.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, let me just calm down, let me go inside and start opening myself up. If you have that, if you do the choice, if not, you keep bumping every time, right? But for
Right.
me, it's super important to surrender. That's the word. Into the feminine,
Right.
it's really surrender. Stop fighting, stop sacrificing, stop trying.
Yeah.
Surrender to what is.
Well, this is manifestation, right? This is manifestation. This is why you can manifest from a masculine place, being a female, and it'll get you somewhere. Like it's not like you're not going to
not
get
like-
results.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
you're going to get somewhere, but there's like this like push, and you have to like be in your mind. You have to
Even
know
that
figure
energy,
it out. It's
right?
like it's draining.
Again.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But the magic around tapping into ease and flow and grace and like surrendering and like
Bliss.
having shit just synchronously like show up, which is what we do, right? This is
We
we
talk
both be like,
about-
oh
we're
my god,
we live the same lives.
right,
best.
literally. But that only comes with women with being okay with stepping into this feminine power, because that's that. Otherwise, you block manifestation, right?
Yeah. And I love that you brought preference to it by saying it's almost like it is the braver, scarier thing to do is to allow the feminine.
Yeah.
Right.
Because our whole
Totally.
world and programming has been in the to do and let's think it through and let's
Yeah.
figure it out and let's force this and let's
Right.
life is scarcity
Right.
and survive
Right.
and all that
Struggle,
bullshit.
chaos.
Yes.
And that this message hasn't been heard enough, I believe,
Yeah.
and that people go, oh, like literally when we allow, I'm worthy of balance and flow and ease and grace and selecting the people I want to work with and
Yeah.
the schedule I want, there's no force or fight to anything.
Right.
We receive at such a massive degree and it just keeps getting easier and greater, and that is actually us tapped into our divine manifestation qualities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yet it is almost I think a lot of guys will see it as like, this is what's like this is bravery. Vulnerability is bravery.
Yeah,
the
100%.
softness
Right.
is bravery. Being fully seen and heard, and even with yourself to sink into your softness and be like, oh, sweet little boy, sweet little girl,
Right.
oh, what are you feeling?
Right.
And share from that place.
Totally.
That is actually true bravery, and
Right.
that is the feminine.
Yes.
That's really being empowered at the end. Like you really
Totally.
let yourself go inside and feel, and break with all the structures. Because if you see what has masculine energy created in this earth, a mess. You're so in your mind. You're so disconnected.
It's all
That's
fucked
what
up.
women are ruling right now. Is the goddess
Right.
rising in men and women?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Really, we have to
Yeah.
acknowledge and know that.
Right.
And this fucking like ego, masculine ego, is burning down. There's
Right.
no other way.
Right,
Look what
right.
we're doing, like wars and cutting trees, and everybody's like so
Crazy.
close into themselves. And that's
Yeah.
what I tell my clients to. Like the first thing they do is like open your chest, be vulnerable, let yourself be seen, be open, relax, receive, be in a receiving mode. Because if not, you're always protecting and covering yourself and
Right.
closing to the infinite
Right.
possibilities of magic in life.
I would love to hear from you guys a little bit on your take on sacred masculine, because I also
Yes.
don't want people to think that masculine is bad or
Yeah.
wrong, or that
no.
it's controlling or whatever. But I think there's also, especially sacred masculine in men, there's this kind of identity image of what masculine is, which is maybe actually very different. Because speak on it.
'Cause it's gotta be this, right?
Speak on
I
it.
love that.
Well, yeah, there's, for me in my life, there's definitely a role that masculinity creates, and the space that it holds for people around me.
Right.
Whether it's women or other people, it holds a
How many times
strong
am I
space.
like, thank you for being the magnifying masculine in our
Yes.
team and protecting and providing and loving, supporting that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a
Yeah.
power of stepping into that masculinity where you're like, okay, now I know what it's for, and now I know how not to abuse it as well. Because when the abuse comes in is when you start to overpower and overshadow
Right.
even the women in your relationships and your lives. When you step in and say, I will always protect you no matter what happens, and you put them behind your shoulder, you rid them of all those beautiful life lessons and
Right.
letting them rise. So it's there as a helpmate. It's I'm helping along with the rep, and I know when to step in.
I want you to
and
come in
when
a
to-
little more so you're in the other video.
I know when to step in, and I know when to step out, and I know how not to abuse it.
Right.
And there's, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you're touching on it's the magnification of relationships. Like we were talking about AJ, right? And it's like, yeah, we call each other epic 11 besties, which
Yeah.
AJ's watching. Mwah, mwah, mwah,
AJ,
we love you.
Mwah.
Because we both understood that relationships are only meant to magnify.
Right.
That it's not this place of like, oh, I need you to complete me and this,
Totally.
da da da, which is all, you know, the unconscious bullshit we've been taught of.
Yeah.
You know, of it's too codependent, and instead of standing in power, and you're standing in power, and you're both meant to rise in your discovery of the masculine and the feminine, your doing and your receiving, your passion and your, you know, allowance, the surrender and all of it, to then magnify the space and experience of it.
Yeah. And anything else thinks that the feminine is weak. And when you stand it
Oh,
right
isn't
and you
that
try to do that, you're like,
Emotions are
oh,
weak.
you poor little weak thing, let me
right.
control. And that's just a controlling
Yeah.
component. It
Right,
has no
totally.
place.
That's part of the bullshit, though, don't you think? That you get to
Total
overcome is
hypnosis
thinking emotions are weak. I know I got to overcome that for myself too.
Yep,
Of course,
massive.
Well,
emotions
this-
are weak and all that.
The same, we're scared of feeling that. So for
Yeah.
men, it's easier to judge the woman and say, you're this, you're that, you're that,
Yeah, yeah.
and attack her because he doesn't want to feel himself. I did it for myself. I'm not
Yeah.
like, there was a moment in my life when, don't even touch that. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to touch those parts of myself.
Yeah.
Right? So
I
it's,
can't imagine. You're so soft and sweet.
no, but I went through it. Yeah, and now what I feel, for me, the sacred masculine really is holding that space
Yeah.
for even women to bring out their emotions. But you're there
thank
holding
you.
them without playing
And
the
for men too.
game.
And
Of
for men too
course,
as
of
well.
course. But we're there like, okay, let's play the game a little bit, right? Because it's a whole cosmic joke. Like whatever emotion, you feel it today and tomorrow you don't feel
It's gone.
anything,
Right,
right?
right.
It's a whole illusion, but let's play it. Don't
Right.
get identified as a character in the story. Just watch it and be there. That's the sacred masculine that we both play.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
do the sacred masculine for me all the time.
Yeah.
You hold me and I go into my crisis too. Like why not? And she's there observing.
Right.
It's not like men, woman. It's not the body really. We are both, and we play both roles together.
Totally. Yes.
Beautiful explanation of that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
So-
The world needs to hear this. Yes.
We had a dance party before.
We did.
Regan and I were really grooving now here by the pool. We like the pool stuff. Yeah, so I'd love to know, like, even if you guys have questions on this, yet what I felt was just really important is
What's
is
up?
do we have a question there? Our bodies,
Yeah.
men are physical, built to give encouragement. I love the explanations of it, because even in the fact that through all of this, through our own discovery of utilizing our to-do energy and our receive energy, is how then it becomes just like we have more ease, we have more grace, we have more flow, we have more abundance, we have more love, and yet you actually produce more. Right?
Sure.
You know, it's so much more effective because you're so in tune
Totally.
that we can just, you know, we were laughing. I mean, we were supposed to do the live probably a while ago.
Yeah.
We got into just
hour ago.
pleasure and play. Like
Right.
we went to lunch and we're just laughing our
Right.
asses off and talking about the synchronicities of, you know, Greg's laughing at how, you know, Mars really could get to the details, and I'm like, you don't get it. Like we create something, we're just doing it, and she's like, yeah, that's how I operate. And I'm like, see?
He's like,
And we're just like, we just are in flow and we go, and how, you know,
Right.
like we're talking about schedules and different things, and you know, you're traveling all over the world, absolutely playing, you know, you just did 1 million, you're kicking ass, and how people, we were talking about how someone might message me and say, oh, I know you're so busy, and I'm like, not really.
Not really.
I'm like,
Not that
actually,
busy.
I just have a level of like, I'm balanced, and this is my plan, this is my business.
Right.
You might think I'm busy because you can't get into my schedule, but that's
Right.
because I'm fucking balanced, and I have an amazing, awesome life.
I'm busy with awesomeness.
Yeah, and that's a level of your self-worth and respect that you
Right.
say, I, you know, like I only take on so many personal clients. It doesn't matter if you're going to pay me $1 million. If I'm
Right.
full, I'm full. You know, because that's what creates that balance and that alignment for me, which then calls in the greater $5 million deal for something else, because
Right.
I'm actually holding that space and holding that container for myself. And I love the idea of you talking about holding the container.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
I believe that relationships are just holding a container of love, acceptance, and support.
Yeah.
That's all we're, so when you're in your triggers and you go into your softness and your vulnerability, she holds that space, and it's vice versa, right? And
Right.
that is also the masculine, feminine. So that even might apply here in the polarity.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're like, I knew there was something
Right.
else that I wanted to bring up, and I just started to go, and it would come.
It was
Right?
exactly that.
The polarity.
Right, and
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, especially for people that are looking to attract amazing relationships into their life, like, polarity's huge, and I think so many people look externally, like, oh, he's like this, or she's like this, no,
Yeah.
you need to look at you,
Or I'm a
right?
girl, I have to act like this so that I can have a guy that
Right.
acts like that.
Right, but I'm just going to speak to the elephant a little bit, like how
Yeah.
many successful women aren't in amazing relationships at the same time, and they're not filled with love and grace and all this beautiful stuff because they're centered in masculine, right?
Yeah.
So opposites attract, and then they have unhealthy feminine men show up as well that haven't done the work to ground into sacred masculine.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you really want to be with someone who is grounded in their sacred masculine, you need to be grounded in your
do it
sacred
too.
feminine.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
but people aren't really linking that up quite yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So interesting.
And I feel that like the imbalance is because we're not linking it in ourselves. Like I've seen it with all this,
Well, everything
with all
that,
this
right,
time.
is a
Of course,
reflection
it's a
of-
Yeah.
reflection, but playing the masculine, feminine, just within us, right? So the masculine, a quality of the masculine I love that is not being acknowledged is presence. Masculine,
yes,
you always
the
think is
best.
doing and going, and that, yeah, it's true. But
And
just
guys,
presence.
that will make women just
this
melt,
is
right?
this
Hold the
is,
space,
Yes,
be
just
present
hold
with me.
space.
Exactly.
Just be present.
And
you
I'm
don't
like,
have
oh, I
to
love
do
you forever.
nothing.
Right, right.
And then
Actually,
after that
yeah.
presence is when the Shakti, what we call the Shakti, the feminine, comes to dance, comes to play inside of us. It's not even, I can do it for women, but I do it
Yeah.
for myself.
Yes.
So for me to be in that place of creativity, of joy, of expression,
Yeah.
I need to start with presence. I need to be available. I need to surrender to this energy. Then the feminine comes and plays.
Yeah.
And then we play around, and then we come back to presence and observe, okay, how is this? It feels good, or was it too
Right.
much?
Right.
So, you know, you're always playing that masculine,
Yeah.
feminine.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful
And I want to
see it
honor
inside.
you did that, because we were all going to go to lunch, and Regan's like, "Oh no, Juan Paul, he's gonna ground." And we
Yeah.
came back here, you know, we ended up playing and not being like, "Oh, we have to jump on a live." We're like, "Fuck
Right.
it, we're playing, we're having
Yeah.
a good time. We'll
Yeah.
get to it when we get to it." And we come back, and you were over there in the grass doing your breathing exercises. You were you were centering yourself and grounding yourself, and you said, "That's what I get to do to hold this center and this ground for myself, where I am operating at my highest." Greatest, you know, magnitude.
Yeah.
And then you come back, we're like, "Cool, now come play." And
Right.
it all works out perfectly, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here
Can
we
you
are.
sit on that?
And here we are.
Nope, it's perfect.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. And I
amazing.
actually think, unless there's anything else you guys want to share, I think like our event's probably starting.
Yeah,
We're meant to be
they're
inside.
showing the mountain on the
Being good
window.
students.
yeah, we're like, we gotta play, we get to play.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. So, you know, we
Amazing.
might jump on again. There might be something else that we want to share. If you
probably
guys
will
have
be.
questions for us, ask us more questions.
Yeah.
I feel like we got a really good, understanding of the masculine, feminine,
good
having
panel.
all of us. It was a good panel.
Yeah.
Really
Good
sexy.
panel. Right.
Yes.
Good looking panel.
I know, right?
Yeah.
This is a reflection of ourselves and all the hearts. We love you guys. My kids are so good with
I
hearts.
know. I'm
They
like, how did you
No,
train
no,
your
no, 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 you don't want to
I did.
You
I
got
trained
one.
them. I literally every live I'm like, "Hi guys, give me hearts," and then they give me hearts, and
We
I go,
have to ask for what you want, right? Yeah.
and then they give me more hearts, and then they just give lots and lots of hearts, and I feel so good. Right?
I don't even
They're
think
training
people
me.
know that we're on 2 different
They're-
live streams
they're
at the
They're
same
like,
time.
hey,
See,
this is coming.
they're actually training
Yes.
me because every time they give me so much love, I'm like, I want to jump on live.
Right.
Oh, so you're
Share.
telling me you're like the little puppy because every time they give you hearts, you're like, feed me, feed me, feed me,
Yeah.
feed me.
I just love to receive love because I love
Right.
myself, so I'm worthy of all the love.
Yeah.
So you never know, guys. We've got 2 more awesome days together,
Right.
plus the rest of today, where we get to do some amazing stuff, and we haven't even tapped into like all the stuff that we,
Right.
whoa, what we're diving
Forget
into,
about
and we're
it.
imprinting, and we're exactly.
Crazy.
So there might be some more love.
I'm
that we
impressed
jump
we even
onto,
got this
guys.
out. To
I
be
know,
honest, like
right?
amongst
I
everything.
know. I felt like at the end of before we went to lunch, I was like, my brain is doing this.
Right. You can
From
feel
all
it
of that,
away.
that I'm like,
Yeah.
and then for us to just dive into something like this subject, it seems a little minuscule compared to what we're going into, and what we're diving into, which is why we're expanding and growing and investing in ourselves like motherfucking
Exactly.
badasses that love
Exactly.
ourselves to be our highest, greatest good. So,
Amen
Yep.
to that.
yeah, we'll see if we jump on again and share more loving with you guys. I mean, I'm sure you loved all of this.
Yes.
All beautiful,
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
All right, guys, we're gonna go.
All
We
right.
love you.
Bye.
Mwah, 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 mwah.
I'm gonna play hit the button.